Landscape in a good and a safe way, and hopefully giving you a little bit of knowledge to have a bit of a go at home, but also linking in with the knowledge that certainly cool or low intensity fires is based around the principles of the traditional owners and the work that they've done in the landscape for a long time. So we're not going to teach you 50,000 years worth of knowledge now, and have no intention to, but we just give you a few little tools that you might be able to use. And also Shane's going to talk about some of the work that's going on where we're trying to build the knowledge and the skills within the community, particularly the Aboriginal community. So we start talking about fuels and understanding fuels, because if you're going to burn, you've got to understand fuel, you've got to understand weather, you've got to understand terrain. So a couple of real basic things. This instrument here is what's called the Wiltronics, and it's used for measuring fuel moisture. So for a burn to be successful, you need a fuel moisture somewhere between 10% and 20%, very roughly. If it's less than 10%, it's too dry. If it's greater than 20%, it's probably too wet. So you need to have a bit of an understanding of fuel moisture. These are about $5,000 and you won't get one at Bunnings. But you don't need something like that. And certainly Aboriginals didn't have anything like that. They had a profound understanding of the bush, and the bush will talk to you. So you bend the bark and it's pretty limp, the leaves are limp, it's damp. If that was really dry, it'd just snap off. So listening to that, the crackle factor, what we call it. So when you walk through the bush and you hear that crunch, 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 that's not good, that's too dry. But if it's a bit of a softer, sort of gentler crunch, that means that the fuels are probably more suited to burning. This is probably a little bit damp. This is from up in the bogies this morning, and it was a bit damp. But understanding the fuel moisture for a start, to understand what will and won't burn and how it will burn, is a good starting point. And then understanding fire behaviour, where a fire is usually going to be about twice the height of the fuel. So if you're burning Phalaris, you're going to have flame height like this at times, depending on the conditions and the weather and so forth, but it'll flare and it carries plenty of thatch in it. So to change that flame height, knock it over, mow it. So if you've got an edge that you're concerned about, now you've got flame height towards the fuel height. It's the same fuel, but you've just rearranged it so that you're bringing the flame height down, so it's a whole lot more manageable. So they're just some simple little things to consider, and it might be just an edge where you're concerned that the fire might get away from, that you treat in that way. This stuff, everyone know what this is?
Kangaroo grass.
And I've assured everyone I didn't take this out of the bush. I pinched it out of a roundabout on the highway. But it would be lovely to have more of this stuff and less of this stuff. You look how green it is after a long dry, and it's not carrying a whole lot of dead thatch. It loves to burn, and it'll respond to a burn, particularly around this time of the year. But that would be preferable along our roadsides than that. Really good grass. So fuels will respond differently. We need to understand how they respond. We need to understand what the wind is going to do if we're burning. So this is a kestrel. This is an instrument we use. It'll measure wind speed. It'll tell us the temperature and the humidity and a whole lot of stuff that I don't understand, and tell my phone all that information which I don't understand either. But you don't need expensive a gear like that to monitor weather. Now we do a test here. We say to people, what is this? What is it? A stick. You've done this before, haven't you? Alrighty. Tie a bit of ribbon on the stick and it becomes a wind measuring device. It's telling us wind speed, it's telling us wind direction, and understand the Beaufort scale. The Beaufort scale's a way of reading how the difference of an angle of a ribbon will tell you wind speed. More importantly, it's telling you if something's changing too, so you can monitor this. And we actually tie a bit of ribbon on our aerials when we're out in the bush burning, and just keep an eye on that. It'll tell us when the wind changes, or if the wind suddenly drops down. Just a good little indicator. So you can do that when you're burning yourself, and just keep an eye on things.
So what wind speed is that?
Oh, that's fairly stiff. That's probably 15 to 20k at the moment. We're getting a bit of a gust coming through now, so it's getting up to a point where it might be a bit too windy to be burning. You probably want around the 10k mark is an ideal speed, which is usually down around that sort of position for 10 kilometres an hour. So the wind is your friend when you're burning. Don't be afraid of wind. You use the wind, and use the wind with backing fire, which is what certainly Shane's ancestors understood, how to get a backing fire and manage a backing fire. Before I get Shane to talk about using fire, to understand how fire moves, a fire will travel in the direction of the wind. We call that heading fire. That's nearly the speed of the wind. It'll also spread on the flanks at around half that speed, so we call that flanking fire. It will also spread backwards from where it started very slowly at a very slow rate, and we call that backing fire. And that's the fire that we use for cool burning, and that's how the Aboriginals would master getting that backing fire, and knocking out the heading fire, managing the flanking fire, and just using that gentle backing fire at very low intensity, very slow and very controllable. Talk about the drum. Better talk about the drum.
This is good for people to have going home.
Really keen, if you're doing any burning, and it doesn't matter whether you're burning 1,000 hectares of bush or 2 square metres in the backyard, you should always do a test burn just to see what the fire behaviour is like. And this is a simple way. It's just a 44-gallon drum with the ends cut out, and you can just sit that on the ground in the area that you're going to burn, get a match, drop in it, and see what happens. You can run around the outside with the watering can if you want to, but you're going to hold the fire in that spot, and you'll get an indication of the fire behaviour. So if you've got flames coming out the top, you're probably not going to want to burn it. But if you've got a nice little gentle fire like that, really good, safe way so that you can feel confident that the conditions are right and the fuels are right for you to do a burn. Very inexpensive thing to do. So Shane's going to talk about some of the work that's been going on in some grassland with using this backing fire.
We did a burn last year, just over in Yard, and using the wind. Phil was a part of the fire, but the night before we were doing the burn, we had a storm warning come through. If it was a CFA fire, it probably would have been called off because of the 80 to 100k gusts of winds coming through. But we still went out on country, and this is the thing, our people were always on country. The country tells you when it's ready to burn. We got out there and the winds weren't that strong, so we decided to put a match to the ground, and we burned along a fence line, and Phil and Kath had done a burn a couple of months earlier, so one side we had that as a fuel line, our brake, along the fence line, we used watering cans from the garden and just had someone in front of the fire, about 2 metres in front of the fire, just running a bit of a water line in front of it. Lit the fire in the corner, so we've got the wind coming from this way now. We'd light the fire down in this bottom corner and just 1 point ignition and just let that slowly go out. And we probably burned an acre, close to an acre, and you could have burnt that with 2 people with a couple of watering cans and controlled it. One side, the other side, opposite side to where the previous fire was burnt, there was vehicle tracks going down through the grass. There was the smallest bit of green in there. That was enough moisture to pull the fire up. You don't need much moisture to pull up a fire when you're doing a cool burn. So I've got a video I'll whack it on so you can walk past and have a bit of a look at it, at the actual fire we did. But working against the wind, it's so easy. Our people used to burn. You can make them social events. Like you can have young kids and up to elders when you're doing a burn, because they're not quite intense fires. With them being slow and back burning, all your insects and all your lizards and everything have got time to move away. With a cool burn, once the fire goes through, you can actually touch the ground straight away afterwards. There's no heat in the ground. So even the real small little insects and that can actually go down into cracks into the ground. As soon as the fire goes across, they'll come back out. So another thing with fire, you had to know your country. It's not about just going out there and putting a match to the ground to burn it so you get your grass back. You've got to know what animals are in that bush too. You've got to know all your medicine plants. You've got to know all that information. You don't want to go and put a fire through an area where you've got medicine plants before they've dropped their seeds and stuff like that. So and same with animals. You don't want to put a fire through an area where you've got certain animals breeding that have got young. They're not going to be able to get away. So, like Phil said, we're working with mobs all over Victoria working together, but we're working with mobs over the whole of Australia trying to get knowledge back. So, to me, it's really exciting because it's not about just burning country. It's going to give us all our knowledge about all of our medicine plants, all of our animals. It's going to give us so much knowledge that we've lost over the years. There's indicators. So you might burn an area here this year. Next year, if you've got a lot wetter area, you'll be there a lot earlier. But that's what I mean. Our mobs they're always on the country. So they know in all the different sorts of bush that we had what indicators were right.